GameCola faithful, and welcome to the GameCola Podcast. This is podcast number 189. If you pirate a video game, is that like a dash and dine?
I think it's a crime.
I am your host and podcast commander, Joseph Martin, joined by...
I'm Blu Ryder, and I'm also capable of slant rhymes.
I'm James Pelster, and I have committed a podcast crime.
Dine is not a slant rhyme with 9.
I'm sorry also for talking over you in the intro. The joke just came to me early.
This bothers me, Blue, because I very specifically considered using dime, like a 10-cent American coin, as the rhyme, and I thought, no, I don't want to do a slant rhyme. So for you to come and tell me that I in fact did a slant rhyme is honestly inexcusable.
Yeah, but it was funny.
It's almost as if you said something that you knew would make me mad, and thus making the podcast funnier, because it's always funnier when Joseph's mad, and Blue is the real mastermind. Sorry, mastermind, so it's not a slant rhyme there. Is that better for you? Mastermind. Mastermind is my favorite Pokemon. What is the true cost of video games? The cost of video games, the price we've paid to bring video games into the world, and the world being the specific locality that they must be in for us to play them.
The cost is everything.
The well-being of the devs.
Yes. This is Blue. You've hit the nail on the head a little too early. You need to extend it out so we can
I'm sorry, I have no idea. What's the video game?
Yeah, I think I've heard of them. They're like, have you ever played Monopoly?
No.
Oh, okay. So it's when you grow as a business.
What's a monopoly?
You block out
it's
all
where
other
you
competition.
Lose all your money. It's where you lose all your money.
That's no. The whole point of a monopoly is to gain all of the money.
But the point of the also the video game, but the board game Monopoly that inspired the video game Monopoly that also shares this trait is that more than 50% of people, unless you're playing 1v1 Monopoly, which poor you, 50% or more of the people will lose all of their money.
This is true.
Yeah, just like real video games now, because they're so expensive that Anna no longer needs to write any more articles about how to spend all of your money on video games, because now you just need to buy one video game, and it's already too much money.
Especially if that video game is Mario Kart World.
Yes. That is the game that has kicked off this international debate about how much video games could, should, would cost. Okay, quick vibe check. How do you guys feel about $80 Mario Kart?
I already in Canada, Mario Kart 8 was like $80, and I still haven't bought it because of that, so it going up is not... I'm probably not gonna get it.
Is it 90 Canadian dollars?
I'd have to look it up, but I don't know.
Based on the
probably more than that because of the tax.
I want to say it's probably 100 Canadian.
Right. Well, we're talking about the base price.
Okay.
This is true. Tax is another factor. Which I think we were talking earlier, Blue, about how, like, the nominal price of some games in Canada, like the base price is sometimes cheaper, maybe all times cheaper, but the tax that you pay on it is pretty much always makes it more expensive, at least in the cases that I looked into specifically.
That's good to know. And good to feel. No, wait, no, that's bad to feel, but it is what I feel.
James, how do you feel about it?
I mean, on the one hand, similar to Blue, I have not played a Mario Kart game since Mario Kart Wii. So I didn't have any immediate plans to purchase this game. Like, it looks cool, and I think it looks very interesting. I like how much more expressive the characters are in particular, but as far as price goes, I don't like it. I don't like the idea of an $80 game, and this is coming from someone like $80 for a game to me is like game plus DLC, like that's like the special edition of a video game price for me. But also at the same time, as long as we've held out, I think I've had this discussion at some previous point. It is amazing that games have sort of held on to the price that they've been at for as long as they have. I just feel like the problem is that now it's moving too quickly. People were already riled up when I think it was Tears of the Kingdom was going to be $70 base price US, and for Mario Kart World to now be $10 more than that in the span of, gosh, when did Tears of the Kingdom come out? 2021, 2022? Just in that short of a span of time, that jump in price again feels like a lot. And then obviously I think the new Donkey Kong game is 70. So not all of these games are just getting a across the board price bump, but it definitely feels like a lot of the big name first party titles are just going to be more expensive. And I don't know, I'm split because on the one hand, I recognize that game development has really only been getting more expensive. And so on the one hand, yeah, I can see why prices would go up because just keeping up with inflation is, they should have been at this price probably a while ago. But I'm not happy about it.
Yeah, there's two different ways of looking at price, I feel like, right? You hit on one, right? Which is you look at a thing and you think, how much money did it cost, or how much value, if you want to be like this is the cost of labor and this is the time that was spent and like all of the value. You turn that into money somehow in some magical formula in your brain. In your brain specifically, James. No one else gets to use their brain for this.
Yep. Oh, thank goodness.
We're all using your brain to figure out how much video games could cost. But you look at a thing, you look at how much, let's say, abstractly, money it costs to make that thing. And you think, because it costs this much, this is how much the price should be, regardless of how I feel about it, right? Like, even if I'm not going to buy it, like, even if it's like, that's not something that I would buy at that price, but because of how much it costs to make the thing, I think that that is a fair price that I am not going to spend the money on, because it's just not worth it to me. The other angle is the price should be the value of the thing, independent of what it took to make. You could spend a lot of time and a lot of effort on something, put a lot of value, put a lot of money into it, and then at the end of the road, at the end of the trail, you get to something and it's not very good. And you say, well, the value of it is not what you want it to be, is not the amount of money you put into it. The value of it is what it is. And that definitely feels like more of the perspective that you get when people are talking about Mario Kart World, the flagship Nintendo Switch 2 video game that was announced in the Nintendo Direct a while back. That's sort of the thing that we're talking around, because there's other video game cost stuff that's happening in general. And I think that when you get, I think one of the reasons that this gets heated in some ways is I don't think anyone's like on either camp, but like they kind of, everyone has their own mix of this. And when people who have different mixes come into the same environment as each other, they can get really heated about it, because they're just you're operating under different worldviews.
What?
Right? Like, there's one worldview that's like, hey, I don't really care. Like, Mario Kart 8 could be an $80 game in value, but I don't think we should make games that are $80 games in value, because that will encourage other games to price themselves make it easier for other games to price themselves at $80, when we should be making smaller games for less money. I believe that is an opinion held by one Blu Ryder.
Yeah, it's rough.
I can sort of understand that. Like, in the sense of almost, I'm not necessarily saying that we're starting from the price and working backwards in terms of how much should we put into this, but in a sense, I guess you could definitely target game development that way, of saying this is like in the same way that that console makers often sell their consoles at a loss. They're like, okay, we're planning in advance, so that this is roughly how much it's going to be. This is because they need to at least know how much money on average are we going to be losing per sale of the console, that will be, so that we know that we will make it up with the software, et cetera, et cetera. But and then with all of that extra variability in mind, it probably makes it even more complicated. But I I do agree that I wish, I say I wish that people made games cheaper, or as in, like, made them with less, less expensively, I guess you could say. But then
Right.
we have an indie game scene. Like, it exists.
You would trade some quality for the respective price drop, right? Like, you're not saying, I want this thing that exists the way that it does to cost less all the time. I'm sure there are some games where you would look at it and be like, this should be less.
Yeah, this just as it is should cost less money. Yeah, yeah.
But, like, you would say, I would make the graphics a little worse, the game a little shorter, some stuff a little less polish, but for a cheaper price. That is a trade-off that I would be willing to make, and I think would be a good idea for this particular video game. Like, that's definitely, like, something that you can apply.
The original quote was for a bigger price, like getting more of those indie style games, but for a better price for that. Like, it came up yesterday, I believe. Mouthwashing is like $15. It's a short game. It's got very stylized pixel graphics and stuff, and I think it should cost more than it's worth more than it costs.
Yeah, I mean, you could definitely, I think, usually only in the indie spaces do you get into situations like that. I don't know, there are probably some, like, a greatest hits of video games where people would have been like, if I had been confident in knowing how good this video game was going to be, now that I've played this video game, I might say that it's worth $80, right? Like, and then, like, sometimes people do pay, like, effectively $80, $100. Like, when you have DLC, like, obviously it's not one-to-one, but, like, in a sense, sometimes you are kind of like, well, I'm paying $100 for Smash Brothers. Because I want all the characters, right? And for some people, that's worth it to them. Sometimes people will be like, well, let's see, like, how many hours did I play versus the cost? And that's, like, a metric, but not a great metric, because sometimes it's like, I spent a lot of time in this game hoping it would get better, and then it didn't. That doesn't mean that it was worth it.
Something that just occurred to me is potentially implementing something like, a bit like how, if either of you are familiar with buying music from Bandcamp, which is a pay what you want, but the artist can choose to set a minimum floor for the price. So in this case,
so it's like
something
itch.io.
like... Oh, is that how itch.io works as well? Okay.
Yeah.
Then there we go. It's already...
I
figured it had probably already been done, but I feel like now, that works better for indie games, especially games that are small and short and sweet. But potentially the other issue there is, and maybe they've solved this problem as well, if you get something and you go, well, I've never, this is an indie game from someone I've never heard of, it looks cool, but I don't know how much I'm going to enjoy it. So what if I want to pay sort of the minimum price right now, and later on, the indie games, a lot of those, I imagine, don't necessarily have DLC or some other additional thing you could do to support it. So maybe... I mean, aside from just buying the game twice, you could make an additional donation on top of your initial purchase. So you say, okay, I bought this game for its base price of $15, but I feel like after playing it for 2 years, it's one of my top 10 favorite games of of recent times, and I would like to contribute an additional $10 or something and say, as a sort of a thank you to help support the developer. I feel like that might be that might be a cool way to do things.
Yeah, you can.
The other thing,
I'm pretty sure you can tip on itch.io.
Oh, nice.
I'm not entire. I forget, but I think that's a thing.
I would also say that there's a very different feeling. Like, when you have an indie game, usually that's a smaller team. Particularly if you're, like, on a place like itch.io. Right? Like, sometimes it's just one person, right? And so, like, when you're doing that tip, it's like, I'm giving it to the person who made the video game, right? Versus, like, once, like, we'll call it AAA video game is made, if you give more money, right? If there was a tip button on the, Xbox Game Store, whatever it's called now, the whatever online digital storefront that exists, it's not necessarily going to be, it wouldn't be, it doesn't exist, first of all. And if it did, you would have a much looser sense of where that money is going. And I don't mean, like, sometimes it's like, I see jokes where, like, independent artists, and including game developers, will be like, oh, you donated $5, probably thinking I would put food on my plate, but haha, I indulged in one of my hobbies instead, haha, right? Like, I don't mean it like that. I mean more like, which people, right? Like, if I really liked the music in a game, and that's what put me over the edge to say I want to put $5 extra, like, does that $5 extra go to the person who made the music? Like, it gets complicated.
Mm-hmm.
The smaller team you have, the less complicated that feels. Usually the relationships will be very clear, right? Like, if the person said, like, oh, hey, I hired this songwriter, you would have a pretty good sense. It's like, okay, this person, I could, like, find that songwriter and donate $5 to them in some way, probably. They have a Bandcamp, or most people who would, maybe not most, but I would imagine that a lot of people who are of that caliber have some way where you can, like, tip them effectively. At a certain point, it then becomes like, how many websites and how many Google searches are you willing to do to figure out how to do this, to donate money to someone for this extra price? So at that point, it becomes more of a social engineering problem than a practical one. Because just going back to a website and doing it later seems like a difficult retention. What I feel like there's, like, a rule of thumb that's like, at every additional click you lose, like, 10% of people. I don't know if that's true, but, like, something like that, right? You lose some fraction of people every additional step it takes to do something.
Yeah.
So, like, if you can just get it all in one, that's kind of the best situation.
Yeah. I will say, that was actually something that I personally did years ago when I was playing the game, the 2064 read-only memories. I really liked the music in that game, so I actually, the artist that they hired to do the music for it had his own Bandcamp, and so I purchased the soundtrack on Bandcamp via their page. So that was something that I did, and I think it even came with a couple extra bonus tracks or something like that. So yeah, that's definitely something. But again, you're right that, like, the more involved the process is, the more, the less convenient it is, the less likely people are to do it. So, like, definitely, it was for me. It was because I'm not always super obsessive about music in video games, but every now and then I'll just find a game which has a soundtrack that I really like, and that game in particular had a great soundtrack with its sort of, like, mid 90s PC, like 90s PC synthesized vibe with some other cool samples and stuff thrown in. I really like that aesthetic. So anyway, I digress.
Yeah, I think something you brought up earlier, which I agree is interesting, is that we really did sit at, like, $60 US for quite a while. Was that, Blue, was that the same, do you feel, in Canada? Like, do you have in your brain, like, a video game costs X Canadian dollars?
$80.
$80. That's like the video game price.
For like the big ones.
For like a
like
Nintendo game.
Nintendo games are always gonna be like $80 basically.
Mm-hmm. But then like other like AAA major games would also be $80.
Yeah. About that, yeah.
Yeah. So I think there are, this is, I don't know enough about the industry to really know, right? But like, I feel like a gut check. One was, I think one aspect is like games hitting more mainstream. So you just got a larger customer base that could support a lower price, right? The more people that you have that are willing to buy the thing, you can get to a point where you can sell. I don't know. The economics work out where it's like, well, if there's more people, maybe we can lower the price. It's just there's more demand. That's an economics thing. I'm a little out of my depth here on that, but like you can see how that could potentially affect things. The Wii kind of was this. I want worse video games that take, I don't know about less dev work, but that were certainly cheaper. And like the console was cheaper to make, and it's like, yeah, that's what the market was like in the Wii era. Is like that was the little niche that the Wii had, was like, if you didn't care about the biggest, greatest graphics, which had been the obsession of consoles before, all the way up to the Wii, really it was all about graphics and performance. You bring in a group that does have like more of a range. You get competition from indie games, right? Like at a certain point, there was like kind of a minimum price that a new game could cost. You weren't gonna like go out to a store and buy a $5 DS game unless it was like in the bargain bin because it was really bad.
And in which case, why would you buy, like, unless you want to play a bad game? You're like the price almost seems to define its quality in a way. Like this, again, we're talking about like how much value do you put into a game. So you could very well say, well, if this game is only $1 or $5, like, is it really? Was there really that much put into it? You could,
especially
you could argue. I'm not saying that's always the case, but obviously.
Well, and also like they wanted to sell this for $30 or $40, and then no one bought it at that price, so they had to lower it to $5.
That as well, even more so.
Right, like that's more of the thing, because like there was basically a baseline, like this is how much a DS game costs, this is how much a GameCube game costs, this is how much a Wii game costs. But then you get indie and like being able to just buy games direct on Steam or something like that. And now you can make games that are $5. And it's like, this is a $5 idea. I turned it into a video game and it costs $5. And you can be like, this is a satisfying transaction. You made something worth $5 and I'm spending $5 on it. But then you have all of these options now where it's like, you don't have to fork up $60 every time you want to play a video game. So that kind of brings down the price, because now the price of these $60 games has to compete with these, and a potential $70 game has to compete with all these, $10, $15, $20 games that are coming out. So that's like these are like multiple theories that I don't know if are true, but like these are, I'm more of a representation of how I've thought about it over the years. And then the last one is the shift from physical to digital, which like, I don't know how it could not be the case that when you do not have to pay for the disc, for putting the information on the disc, for the little plastic thing, for the little paper thing that goes in the plastic thing, you get it all snapped in together, you send it in a box to a place in Wyoming, and someone walks to the store to get it, and all of that. Like, you take that out, even though there are still physical games, like maybe now you're like going to ship a physical game to you even. Like that just pulls out so much, not wasted money, but money that isn't like money that's there by necessity.
Overhead.
And not because I really like the idea that my video game came in a box on a boat across the ocean and I'm going to pay $5 extra for that.
Yeah, I think.
Right? You buy the physical game because it's like, oh, I want to have this. I want to like not have to worry about like a digital thing. I want to be able to share it more easily because Nintendo has not invented digitally sharing games yet. And even now that they have, maybe that does not actually meet what I want out of sharing a game, or reselling a game. right? I think that would be my guess is like the major factor of why we've been able to kind of keep the price down, because I think a lot of the cost, that angle of the cost went down.
Right.
And now it's really all just how much money does it take to put the video game together? And then especially like now that we have a video game, it doesn't cost us very much, like probably like pennies on the dollar, to sell an additional copy. I'm sure there's like, oh, technically you got to host the server, and technically you got to like do all the legal stuff with processing the digital payment and all that. But it's not a lot to sell additional video games.
And and I was actually going to say on that, like, one, I think the term that you're looking for is overhead, cost overhead.
Yeah, like variable cost is another economic term.
Yeah.
Like fixed cost to make the game, variable cost to sell an additional unit of the game.
Yeah, and on it really
there's
quick,
all kinds of economic terms that I don't really understand.
Yeah,
that I can say. Not to say that that's what you're doing,
and
but
same,
that's
but
definitely
also
what I'm doing.
But we're talking more like, well, it's like, okay, the cost of putting this thing, on, again. Obviously, Nintendo Switch, most prominent, or Nintendo Switch 2, is very most kind of prominent example currently. I recall seeing in another server, it was, again, a tweet about some kind of report from a developer saying that it's estimated that one of the actual physical Nintendo Switch carts that actually has the full storage to hold the entire game on it can cost up to $16 per unit. And that's if you're buying them in the kinds of bulk loads that would be like mass produced, because of the technology and the kind of storage like chips that they use. In which case, that I think it was adjacently mentioned next to something about the fact that games that are like $60 or less are going to be the sort of digital code on a card, or the game key on a card, which I saw there's this weird discrepancy with. Some games are just digital unlock codes that are like basically only good once or something like that. Whereas some of these games are like a license key to the game, which is transferable as long as you transfer the cartridge with it. And then only certain games are actually going to have the data for the game stored on a physical chip on that cartridge. And that some of the reason for this shift towards that is because obviously discs, Blu-ray and all that, are less expensive to manufacture, but Nintendo's cartridges are apparently very expensive for the Switch 2. And so that's part of why, basically, if a game is under a certain price, it's not getting the actual physical data for the game on the cartridge, because that would just be too expensive to make, which I find fascinating if true.
Yeah, because there was this... It ended up not being true in the United States. This people really got... So, okay, to back up to the Nintendo Switch 2 Direct. The biggest blunder, and I can see why this didn't happen, but the biggest blunder, in my opinion, is that they did not say the price of anything in there.
Yeah.
And then and that means that the rumor mill has full control over telling people how much stuff costs.
Yeah.
I can see why this might have seemed like a good decision at first. I think probably the biggest motivator would be like, there's no guarantee that the person watching the video is watching the stream that is for the region that they would be paying the price in, and so they could get a price that goes, they could be like someone in London looking at the American stream and getting a roughly wrong idea of how much their game is going to cost because they were looking at the American prices, right?
Yeah.
And then also maybe they, there's a gap between when they film the Direct and when they it's a live stream, but it's a video that they recorded in Premiere, really. And there's we'll get to this also a little bit more later because I've got another angle on this price talk. But yeah, there was announcements of tariffs that make things more expensive, and they were and they knew that something was coming, and they were probably tailoring some aspect of their announcement to what the tariff announcement was going to be. And so I could see how that would add a level of trepidation onto, let's not put any of the prices in the video. Let's just publish it online after the video. But man, I think the extra cost of dealing with that would have been worth it to avoid the current situation where people think physical United States Switch games cost $90.
Yeah.
Even though, like, I feel like that's still really the same upset at Mario Kart World being $80, because like it has always seemed weird to me that digital games and physical versions of the same game cost the same amount of money, when a digital game, surely they make more money on that. And like, that's not, I don't, of all of the, there's plenty of things that feel greedy. That doesn't feel greedy. That feels like, yeah, that's reasonable. Like, that the thing that costs you like pennies to send to me over the internet costs less than the thing that has to travel in a boat to me. And also be made of extant material.
Yeah.
Like, so I don't know, that, I think it was just like, I mean, for a lot of it, and maybe slow me down if I'm, what I was going to say, I was about to say stonewalling, and it's like, that's the opposite. And it's like stone rolling over you, because everyone knows that you roll stones really fast over people. That's the idiom that I'm going with here. But the other fascinating thing that I've been seeing is the Nintendo sucks industrial complex of media. Are you guys exposed to this, or is this just my recommendations because I was like looking into information about Nintendo?
Thankfully not. I have not seen, I can't recall seeing any such media, but also I have very much tailored my algorithms to not be looking at that kind of stuff, just generally based on watching a specific set of creators and a specific type of content.
Yeah, it sounds like you looked at it once and now it's your curse forever.
Yeah. No, that's definitely the vibe. I mean, like, you, thankfully for human pattern recognition, once, like, you get tricked by one of them, and you're like, oh, I think this is like, I think the one that got me was, like, something like, why, oh, this was actually, I think, a Pokemon one. There's also a very big Pokemon sucks industrial complex, which, again, I'm not like, no, these companies don't suck, it's all lies. It's just like, there's people who just every week make a video trying to tell you that this, whatever happened with Nintendo or Pokemon or some other thing, whatever happened was bad. And you just make that video every week and hope that people are mad enough about it that they will click on it, right? Like, you're really just fishing for the outrage before it happens. Just get mad about everything so you can get the people who are mad about it this time. The one that got me was like, why did, I thought it was going to be a video talking about like maybe some development or like insight about like why Pokemon Legends Arceus like kind of looks the way that it does, right? Like, it still seems like it's lagging behind the industry standard, which I would agree with. Visually, it definitely seems like they haven't cracked this yet. It's still seems to be getting better, but it's not on par. That's a fair thing. I might still spend money on it. We'll see how much it costs.
You mean the Z to A?
Yes, sorry.
Pizza.
Yes, Pokemon Legends Pizza.
But then it was just like, just listing out things that they didn't like about the Pokemon trailer, and I'm like, I've seen it. Like, I don't need you to tell me what opinions to have. I thought you would have like some insight or some interesting discussion, but you're just saying, look at that, I don't like that. Look at that. That tree looks weird. Look at that. Those windows are flat. It's like, yes, I can see that the windows are flat. This isn't new information to me.
What shape are windows supposed to be?
Well, they have like windowsills and they're like depressed. Like, they're not like lined up with the brick of the wall. Especially if they have a little fence around them, but the fence is also flat.
They're just like textured on to the side of the building. Okay. But
which is just like the interesting insight is that, okay, clearly they're struggling with getting performance. And so the way that they're addressing the performance issues is by just scaling down the thing. So instead of modeling all the windows, you make the windows flat, and then the performance is going to be better, but the windows look worse. And this is the trade-off that they're making. And it is really interesting, and I'd really like to understand why that, like, because everyone's always like lazy. I struggle with anyone who throws out lazy when talking about a game not being good or not meeting their expectations, because that never seems like it's really the case, right?
Mm-hmm.
I've never seen any conclusive evidence of a video game being bad because of laziness, unless it's like one guy making the game and he doesn't make the game. Like, he very demonstrably spends more time not making the game. Like, that's the only example that I see. Like, in any professional situation, it does not seem like laziness. Like, I'm legitimately interested. Like, we took this team that was primarily working on DSs and 3DSs. They got put on Nintendo Switch 2, and it is not going well. And what is the flaw that is making that happen? Like, that's something I'm interested in. I'm interested in discussions about, like, okay, why now $80? What settled us on $80 video games, right? Like, what are the mechanisms? We were stuck at 60, and people have been floating $70 games for a really long time, and now we've gone to 70 to 80. There are some clear examples that seem right, but, like, I'm interested in insight into, like, people who know what they're talking about, but you can't tell from a YouTube thumbnail whether or not someone knows what they're talking about until you start catching the buzzwords.
But Joe, how else are you going to optimize your SEO unless you throw out all of the buzzwords and all of the outrage? Because outrage is the number one thing that sells everything. This is social media we're talking about. If you're not angry, you're not successful.
Yeah, well, that's actually why Mario Kart World's going to be so successful, because so many people are angry about it. They're all going to buy the video game.
Yep.
Because of how angry they make them,
no,
right? That's how it works.
That's brilliant. We're gonna have just a whole bunch of really angry, people whose YouTube career it is to talk about how angry they are about Nintendo or XYZ other company, and they're all gonna buy this game so that they can point out all of the things that make them so upset. Which, I mean, like, I say that as like a joke, but also, like, there. If it were more nuanced and it were more like insight, then that's what we would call like an actual critique. And yes, you can dislike something and still be like, I'm going to buy this game to dissect what I think are its failings. Like, there's not a way that you can, it's not like there's no way you can't do that in a smart and effective and interesting way. And I'm sure that there will be. I'm sure that there's going to be something that people are, besides, oh, I don't like how this looks. Oh, that's lazy. So, but also because, for instance, it's like $80, that it also is going to definitely give people feel like they've got a little bit more free reign to, like, nitpick and scrutinize, because they're, now you're like, well, now I'm paying $10 more, or like, I think Mario Kart 8 was Mario Kart 8 Deluxe still $60? I think it is.
Yeah.
So, like, you're
that would be. Sorry, go on.
I was gonna say, because you're like, well, this new Mario Kart game is $20 more than the last Mario Kart game. So, like, I feel like, and it's gonna be on new hardware as well. So not only, so we still have to figure out what the actual power of the hardware is, not to mention that it's probably going to be using some kind of machine learning super sampling to upscale the image in some configurations. I don't know if it's going to be all the time or if it's just when it's docked or whatever. But people are going to be scrutinizing the absolute heck out of that game. And I don't know if I would say that the increased price doesn't, to some extent, warrant people going, well, why is it more expensive? Because that's the thing, is I wish a lot of these issues, from a really, really broad perspective, in some sense boil down to transparency. because obviously this is a very complicated process. So there's probably more than any, average Joe can understand or even wants to understand about the process of modern AAA game development and also the economics of running a game development business like Nintendo. But also, if we had some kind of idea of here's the general breakdown of where this cost went into developing this game. Here's where the R&D went. Here's where the development went. Here's how much, art assets we needed. Give us some kind of breakdown of what makes this game besides what we can, besides the obvious, besides just, oh, look it, play the game. To give us some numbers, give us some things to really kind of sink our teeth into to understand better of, and that's not even to say, again, it's a game. A big part of it is, do you enjoy playing the game? And that's not necessarily something that can be quantified. I understand that. But I feel like if we had more insight, official insight into here is why we're raising the price to what it is, I think that would go a long way into quelling some of the outrage.
I think that's a very cost to make the thing argument in a world where there are a lot of people who just don't care about that. They only care about whatever it is at the end. Doesn't matter. You could tell them this is how much it costs to make it. I don't care. It doesn't. The thing that they made does not cost $80. It's not worth $80. And also I think for a lot of people that would for me, and I imagine for you too, based on the way you're talking about it, it's interesting. Like, I would like to know that information just because it's interesting to me.
Oh yeah.
Is it going to move the needle on whether or not I buy the game? Probably not. Is it going to move the needle on how I feel about the price of the game, even though I may or may not buy it? Maybe. But I think for a lot of people who are like the most mad about this, I don't think they care. If anything, they're just going to look at it and go on an itemized list of all the ways they think they could have, I think they could have spent $1 million instead of $2 million. And based on what I think as a person who has played a bunch of video games and therefore knows this.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I don't know how, I think, it wouldn't be bad, but I don't know if it would solve the problems that we're talking about.
Yeah, it might just give them more ammo to nitpick and hyperanalyze.
Mm-hmm.
So really what we're getting at is that there's just no winning. And that I say that I say that, and I don't mean to actually just be like this viewpoint of someone saying that this is not I don't mean to say that the viewpoint is just objectively irredeemable. I just mean I don't fully agree with the viewpoint of this didn't cost $80 to make, so it shouldn't cost $80. I don't know.
It's that there is one solution to the problem, which is don't charge $80 for the video game.
Yeah,
that's one solution.
Mm-hmm. Have you
make
considered
a video game that costs that you have to charge $80 for it to make sense to make the video game?
Yeah.
That's an argument, and that's an argument that I am amenable to.
Right.
I think that it does kind of make more sense. It would be, why limit ourselves, right? What if you could make the best game ever for $100, right? There's a point where it's you should, give it a shot. If you think you have a video game that's worth $100 and you want to do that, I don't necessarily feel like we should limit that, but also it's sort of this is maybe a tortured analogy, but I think about how ever since streaming movies is the way that people watch movies instead of on television, there used to be an incentive to have movies be a certain length. And on one hand, that's limiting, right? Every movie has to be about 2 hours or about an hour and a half, for it to fit into TV blocks. That's really limiting. But now that we don't have that, I'm man, a lot of these people would be better at making movies if they had to make their movies no longer than 2 hours.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And that limitation was actually helping a lot of people. And I feel like opening the door to these higher game prices is going to be more of an effect like that, where you will get some, just like there are some movies where it's like, wow, yeah, this movie is like this long, but like it is worth it and it makes sense for the movie. And it would have been a shame to have like a worse, shorter version of this movie. But I feel like there's a lot more movies where I'm like, this movie should have been an hour and a half, and it is 2.5 hours.
And
or 4.
Plus,
yeah, or 4.
more. That's like not including the 3 extra pieces of content in the credits.
We couldn't fit all of the content for this movie for the theatrical release, so we're releasing the director's cut on 3 discs. The movie is now 10 hours long.
We edited back in a bunch of dead air and
yeah, this is just all of the unedited footage we shot for the movie.
Yeah. I did, this is a sidetrack, but I did accidentally watch, it was a bit of a fever dream, because this was just a night I could not sleep, and I decided I'm just going to watch like 3 movies until it's tomorrow, because I cannot sleep. And I accidentally ended up watching the director's cut of Anchorman 2, or I don't know if it was called that, but it was something like that. And it was literally, they just like, there were a bunch of parts where it was clearly like, and then Will Ferrell improvs a joke. And in this cut of the movie, it was just like, they put like all 3 to 5 takes like in a row.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was the same bit, like not the same joke, but like he just told, like it was like you just took the scene and you took all the parts where he's like, and then Will Ferrell tells a joke, and it was just all of that 5 times in a row with different jokes, but the scene didn't move forward. And I'm like, what am I watching? What is happening? So your joke answer was not as far removed from reality as you thought it was.
Oh man.
Mine?
The other thing I was gonna add is when instead of making this a 2-hour movie, we'll make this a 6-hour TV show. Even though we still really only have 2 hours worth of content.
Yeah.
But if we add the intro and we add the exposition after every single episode start, even though like you're literally sitting down on your TV watching these all in a row, why do we need the exposition
And then you have the Dragon Ball Z shouting at each other for 2 episodes while you power up.
That's a different problem. I don't know if there's a video game version of that. We don't have episodic games as much. We've kind of gone off the episodic games. There was a period, I mean, Telltale went out of business.
Fetch
Quests. They were the
Fetch Quests are sort of the video game version of that.
I can see what you're saying. Like, padding. Yeah, that's different, though, because it's still, like, the content, right? Like, it's not, like, segmenting out the content into, like, discrete bits.
That's what watching Let's Plays are for on YouTube.
Yeah, we've come full circle, haven't we? Now we're the ones with eggs on our face.
I'm sorry.
I don't know. I've gotten out. I think you could tell.
Funny.
I had a lot that I've been thinking about on this, and thankfully there is a podcast where I get to just say whatever I want to say about video games. But I think I've kind of emptied it out there. Sorry if I've overpowered you guys a little bit. Is there anything else on the subject of video game prices that you'd like to share?
Yeah. I don't want to make a big thing about it, but it is a little. I'm still a little. Just like, it's surreal and bizarre that the president of a country I've never been to is, like, directly strangling more than one hobby sphere I have.
Mm-hmm.
And there's
argue
nothing
pretty much
I
all
can
of them.
really do about it. This is about the furthest extent of my power in this situation, is just to say it here. So, thought I might as well.
Nope.
Yeah.
There's definitely a contingent of this. It's not the only contingent. In fact, I think that probably the biggest voices are just the people who are like, Nintendo sucks, and that's my whole YouTube channel. There's definitely another contingent of, I have to make Nintendo the villain, because if I don't, I have to wrestle with the reality that the guy I really like in charge of the United States is directly responsible for this situation. there are people who cannot come to terms with that. And so it has to be, for their ideology to be consistent, it has to be purely Nintendo's fault and greed. Even though video game companies and other companies, like, yeah, I'm not saying they're not greedy. They are greedy, sort of by design of the system. But they didn't, like, suddenly get more greedy, right? If we're going to talk about a discrete worsening of the industry, it's not because they got more greedy. It's just that their greed became expressed in a different way, right? Like, I hear people talk about, like, oh, video game console prices used to, like, get cheaper over time, and now they don't, and it's because game companies are greedy. And it's like, if they did that before, it was because when they did that, they at least believed, and probably did because they kept doing it for a while, it made them more money to do that. They weren't doing it altruistically. It was like, this was a business decision. And now when they don't, I think one thing is, it's interesting that this stopped during the COVID pandemic, where inflation made everything effectively a lot cheaper, including the Nintendo Switch. And so it kind of did have a price drop, just not a nominal one. Yeah, I think that, I don't remember where my point was there. Oh, just that, like, it's it's never an increase in greed. It's a change. And this doesn't mean to say, oh, and so it's good. It's just like, you need to think about what changed, because just saying, oh, they got greedy is like an easy thing to say, but doesn't really mean anything. It's like, no, it's the same amount of greed. So something changed to make this the greedy thing to do. I think you can make, I will pull back about it. You can make some arguments about, like, who's in charge of the company, right? I think that there is a vibe that when Iwata was in charge of Nintendo, that the vibe was just different in terms of the strategies there.
Mm-hmm.
But like, at the end of the day, like, he was still at least arguing that this goodwill, if that's what you interpret it as, which I'm not confident enough to say either way, it was a marketing strategy, right? It was I think this is what will sell the most games. I think this is what will make us the most money.
And not to mention that during that era of Nintendo, there was still all of the issues, like with, for example, like YouTube copyright and a bunch of that other stuff, like the Nintendo, like, Creators Club or whatever. Like, there was that whole, that was the era of where, like, you were afraid to, like, stream or play Nintendo games on YouTube for fear that you just, A, couldn't monetize them, or B, they would just be taken down. And, like, so it's not even that they were just objectively less, like, I mean, now whether that's greed or just, being control freaks over their intellectual property, or any combination of whatever is up for debate, certainly. But and I don't know, it's, I've also heard people saying, oh, well, if Reggie was still president of Nintendo of America, because he fought to put, Wii Sports as the pack-in game in the U.S. when it wasn't in any other region. It's like, yeah, that's true. And, like, on the one hand, it shows it's like, yeah, the greed is also kind of constant, because it shows you that Nintendo didn't actually pack that in. The Wii sold in Japan and Europe and all these other territories without a pack-in game, and that America was the only one different because Reggie fought really hard for it. But then we're saying, oh, the Nintendo Switch 2, like, demo title should be free. It should be a pack-in. It's like, well, I mean, on the one hand, yes, but on the other hand, that's a $10 game that is probably, for, I mean, obviously, the Astrobot sort of demo for the PlayStation 5, that was, like, a really cool game in its own right. And I don't really know how much the Nintendo Switch thing is actually a proper, full-blown game, like, in the same way that Astrobot
weird.
is. So it's like, weird. You could argue that it's like, we're charging money for this because we think that way fewer people are going to use it, and so we'd like at least some kind of return on investment from the people who are so interested in Nintendo Switch 2 that they will play this. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. I will say, like, to sort of Blue's point, there are a lot of things where it's like, man, things are more expensive. It sucks. There's not a whole lot you could do about it.
That's true.
At the very least, with video games, it's like, is you have a lot more flexibility that if it's too expensive for you, A, don't buy it, and B, like, it's not just, oh, and then you don't get to play video games, right? Like, there's a big spectrum of games of various prices out there. You can still engage with this hobby in ways that, like, other hobbies I feel like are hit a lot worse. Right? Like anything that just requires physical goods. Right? And there's still, and I'm not saying that, and so, right, like you still have to have a computer and replace your computer if it's really old, right? Like,
which is
I'm not
also
saying that there
expensive
aren't
now.
things there, but it does feel like of all of the hobbies,
Yeah,
this one has the most flexibility to deal with
and
tariffs.
yeah, and not to mention also if you're like buying things secondhand, that's not as much or even at all an issue, at least if you're buying within like a local territory and not importing from somewhere. Like buying used games is an option. And also I think it, of course, it does go without saying, but I think it's worth acknowledging that we can say, oh, there's a whole bunch of different kind of games you can play. It is still ultimately frustrating to go, this is the game or the series or the console, etc., that I want to be playing, and just being told to sort of, I mean, in a much more rude and blunt sense than you put it, to sort of, you have to suck it up and play something else if you want to play games. That's not fun. No one likes that. That's not the ideal that's not the ideal
Right.
solution to the situation that we're in, but it is, of course, it is still true. And that I think that you can put a positive spin on that of, well, modern games and, new systems and everything are just too expensive. What else? How can I branch out? How can I turn this difficult situation into an opportunity for myself to both save money and expand my horizons into something that I might otherwise not have played? If, like, instead of buying GTA 6 for $100 or whatever they're going to charge for it, and then playing that for the next 200, 300 hours or whatever you want to put into it. Because I know a lot of people play those games, those big, crazy open world games, they play them for ages, and say, okay, let's find an alternative, whether that's something similar but not quite the same, or whether it's something completely different. There's opportunities, there's places to go, and I think you're definitely correct that we are, I mean, I guess entertainment media in a way. Like, I think you might be able to say the same maybe for like movies or music. Is like, well, let me go to the, let me go buy some music from a secondhand store, or like a movie from from a place like that. And that's sort of, to a lesser extent, something that you can do. But I think you're right that with video games we have a lot of options, and that is fortunate.
Yeah. I would also say that, like, part of what I'm saying here, like, the main point is I'm not saying that it's not bad and it's not
Of
worth being
course.
frustrated over. I'm saying that, like, I'm more saying that, like, of all of the things, this one ranks fairly low in how this is impacting my life. And I'm someone who, like, whose main hobby is a video game podcast and website and talking about video games and playing video games because of that, right? And even with that outsized impact, like, I feel like I have a lot of flexibility. There's also, like, if you are listening to a video game podcast, there's like a certain default level of technology that you have access to in your life currently that kind of informs this, right? Whereas like I assume that you have access to a phone or a computer, right? I feel like there's a very small population of our podcast who would be like listening to it on an iPod Shuffle or something, where they couldn't use most devices that you can listen to a podcast on, or that people listen to podcasts on, can also play video games. So I'm assuming kind of baked in that you already can play video games, can watch videos or movies or TV shows, can go to, like you said, like with media, like for music and also older media, there's a lot of stuff that's just free. Go to the Internet Archive. There's free stuff. The Internet Archive also has stuff that sometimes I feel like should be I'm surprised that you get to have that. But then you like read the thing. It's like, oh well, technically this, and this means that we can host this on the Internet Archive. Like, I'm not going to complain. I just mean, like, if you already have access to a baseline level, right, then it's not that there's more flexibility. And also, like, if you're kind of freaking out about it, you might need help to remember that there's more flexibility than might immediately come to mind. There's other things, like if it's a story-driven game, there are lots of times where you could just watch a YouTube video and it's not going to be the exact same experience, but maybe that's, I don't know, like, I don't want to be too, like, we'll just do this other thing that's a little bit worse, right? Like, again, I'm not saying, and then don't be mad about it anymore, then you should just be okay with it. Just, like, comparatively, those are the things that I think about where it's like, oh, man, if this apple costs too much money, I should say bananas, actually. If this banana costs too much money, I just don't get to eat bananas anymore, huh? That's a sort of comical exaggeration. I don't know, but like, there may also be other elements of this that I'm not thinking of, just from the position that I am in, the things that I have, the resources that I have by virtue of being involved in this so long. So like, if you're like, Joseph, that's stupid and you're not considering this, and this, tell me about it. Get in the comments, as they say, and tell me how wrong I am. I am very welcome to my mind being opened on this. You're also, if you're on the podcast, you are allowed to tell me that I'm wrong too, but there's a greater risk that I will yell at you in a comical fashion. So you have to factor that in.
I don't know. I'm too afraid to do it.
Well, there's the board game. It's the other hobby sphere I was thinking about. And they're like, the board game companies are like, they were having this huge surge over the last few years, and then that like stopped, and now they're all dying, basically. It's like, oh, yeah, that's neat. That's a neat sudden development last few months. It's rough.
Yeah, there's stuff like that where it's just like basically instantaneous effect, whereas like, there's definitely going to be effects like this on video games, like, but they're going to be like much more macroscopic and probably long-term, right? Like, oh, this developer that I really like is not going to upgrade their rig for another year because they have to save up a little bit more for that to make financial sense, right? Like, I think it's going to be more spread out and less like you said, Blue, where it's like, oh, we cannot afford to get, like, now this thing that you used to give us money and then we gave it to you and we made money and you got enjoyment out of it and we were all happy about that. That doesn't work anymore. So we can't give you the thing because we'll lose money giving you the thing. And I don't know if you know this, but unless you're already a multi-billion-dollar company, it's not a good business model to lose money on your goods and services that you provide when you provide them. If you're already like billions of dollars company, apparently you're allowed to do that. You just get to do that for fun.
Unless you're publicly traded, in which case you die instantly.
They still do it. You just promise that in the future, once you've made it so that no one else can compete with you because you've been operating at a loss for so long that no one else could make enough money to challenge you. You tell your shareholders, once we do that, then we're going to make like so much money. And then you like try to turn on the floodgates of making more money. And then all those people are like, oh, well, now we can compete with you. And it doesn't work.
Or the shareholders are like, we're too short-sighted to agree with your long-term vision of losing money to make money. And so we've decided to just, immediately kick you out and elect someone new who will make us money immediately.
You don't hear about that because that gets kicked out a lot earlier. The stuff you hear about is this stuff is like, everybody used this because it was such a good value. And it's like, it was such a good value because they weren't making any money off of it. So that they were hoping to get you set up on it so that when they did start trying to make money on it, you would be like, well, I have to use it. It's so well integrated into my life.
True.
I have to buy the new Pokemon game. It's fundamental to my character. Wait, I've gone around in a circle. I'm the problem. I won't buy the Pokemon game no matter how bad it is. I will say I did not buy the DLC for the newest Pokemon game. they've disillusioned me enough that I'm not spending all of the money I could on Pokemon.
Good.
So we'll see. We'll see. I also would say that as someone with a video game podcast, the cost benefit analysis does work out a little differently for me, because I can play a game that I don't like and still get value out of it by yelling about it on a podcast.
Like Jetty does.
Which I think it must be how, I was going to say, that must be how Jetty stays sane. Because...
oh, man. Well, see, the thing is, I'm sure with people with successful video, well, I shouldn't say we aren't successful, but like financially successful video game podcasts probably have an even more incentive to do those things. It's like, at least like with us, we have good things to talk about with other people that we enjoy talking with. And it's, we get to continue doing this thing that we've been doing that we like to do. But there's not really any money in it. So,
hey, there's 5 cents a podcast.
That's fair. I mean,
actually,
listen, I still somehow that Resident Evil 1 video is still popping off.
It's still, people are still watching it. It's no longer always the most viewed, like 20, there's like the default 28 day like view count. It's not always the most viewed one, but it is often. And I don't like.
It is actually
guys,
the most viewed video according to analytics right now. It is the most viewed video by 160 views.
In what time period?
In the last 28 days.
Yeah.
So it has beaten out Super Mario Brothers 2 level 4-3.
That used to be the king, the reigning champ.
Yep.
That's the first one that Nathaniel did, and I think it's really early on one of his playlists about like videos I've made for other YouTube channels, like on his Gemini laser.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that gets a lot of views.
Yeah.
It's it's from like 2009.
Yeah.
So it's in first on playlists like that.
Yep.
And then it gets recommended, and then it also has a secret that people are looking up how to do. And so people will specifically search Super Mario Brothers 2 4-3.
Yeah.
And those are my theories as to why that one does so well.
Yep.
And then, there's difference. Some of them is views versus watch time. That's another metric that you can use for success, or which ones make the most money. Because we're at a scale where like sometimes a video will just make 20 cents because someone clicked on an ad and that brings it to the top of the charts. But that's not a consistent thing. You just got that one Mario video got lucky. Some other top ones are some of the Metroid Fusion ones that help with certain puzzles. And then Final Fantasy VI. That series gets a decent number of hits. I think also people, when I look at them, it's like, oh yeah, this was a boss that was like a puzzle boss. And people were struggling with that. Those are the main ones that I can think of.
Mm-hmm. Or unless it's that one scene from Miles Edgeworth Ace Attorney Investigations where you can see Phoenix and Maya.
That's the other big one. Did you guys want to talk about your 100 video game? I only remember the number 100.
100 Line, Last Defense Academy.
Yeah, the 100 video game.
Everybody
likes it.
Yeah,
apparently.
I think
I don't know what this is. Is this I don't mean
so
this super
it's
dismissively.
Danganronpa but Fire Emblem.
Okay, so it is an anime video game.
Yes, it's very much an anime video game.
It's
not
the
the
title
kind
sounds
that'll
like
get
an
into
anime video
Smash.
game.
Yeah, sadly. Well, there's not enough sword characters to get into Smash. We need to have like at least 5 more sword characters.
So okay, so based on your Danganronpa plus Fire Emblem, so Fire Emblem is already kind of like modern Fire Emblem, in a sense, already feels a lot like Danganronpa and Fire Emblem, with the only difference being the murder. Because like
is that true?
Fire Emblem is split into text-heavy, like text adventure, nearly visual novel.
Okay, it is made by
scenes.
like the guy behind Danganronpa. Does that help?
Well, Fire
That
Emblem
does
is
help,
not.
I see.
The
Not
game,
Fire
the
Emblem.
100 game.
I'm just saying that like the structure of a Fire Emblem game seems like it would be very similar to a structure of a game that is like what you pitched.
I think it's more so the I think what
Of a
you're
modern Fire Emblem game.
Yeah, so I don't play many Fire Emblem games. The primary one I've played was Three Houses, and I can definitely see where there's similarities there. I also saw some people saying it was like a little bit like Persona in the fact that you sort of go around and you have to choose how to spend your time. Because
Yeah.
I mean, I think what it boils down to is that there's more overlap than we necessarily realize, and so we have just some common examples that we use that exemplify these certain mechanics implemented in this certain way. So Danganronpa is visual novel with some mini games. Fire Emblem, a huge part of that gameplay is the strategy, or as you might say, a tactical game. At which point I'm sure Jetty is somewhere just shuddering. But and then the thing that sort of links these two together, I think, what I'm imagining in your perception, Joe, is the sort of the conversations between characters, because in Fire Emblem, at least in Three Houses, because that's the one I know the best, there's points where you can like hang out and sort of strengthen your bonds with characters, and that's definitely something that you also do in Danganronpa, and it is also something that you do in 100 Line. So there's definitely a through line there.
A through 100 line.
Yeah, yes, there is indeed. But when we say like Fire Emblem meets Danganronpa in this case, it's more like gameplay wise, because now we've sort of have instead of the little weird mini game. Well, we still have weird mini games, but now a huge portion of the game is like tactics / strategy game.
When you say tactics, are you talking about like
it's
the like game fire like the same kind of tactics as like Fire Emblem or like Advance Wars?
It's not
or
quite
stuff
the
like
same
that?
because it's a tower defense. But you have characters on a grid. They can move around. They can attack in certain patterns, in certain shapes, and use different abilities depending on the characters. So it's like I think in Fire Emblem primarily, you just attack one. It's more of one-on-one battles, whereas in 100 Line you can attack multiple enemies on a grid
battles.
And there's not like any sort of elemental or like weapon type weakness system like there is in Fire Emblem. It's mainly just you have waves of enemies approaching your base, and you need to defeat them and not let them destroy the thing that you need to protect. And characters move around on a grid and can attack in turns. So it's sort of a turn-based thing. Blue, I hope I'm not drowning you out here.
No, it's I like I only played the demo so far, but I liked that there's like a mechanic where when you get to low health, you can sacrifice a character and they get like a special move.
Yeah, so when you sort of doing your attacks and defeating enemies earns you like voltage points, which you can use to sort of do special moves or give like a character a second turn to attack that round. But also when they're at critical health, it just gives you a free use of their special ability, but it also instantly kills them. Which is okay because they are revived after each wave of combat. So it's
say how Fire Emblem is that kill.
Yeah, so which is that's very different from Fire Emblem. Because Fire Emblem,
and also from the guy who made the murder video game.
Yeah, exactly. But except in the murder video game, death is permanent, whereas in this game, death is anything but permanent. And in fact, you are in some ways encouraged to sacrifice party members if it will be a tactical advantage.
You took 2 games where like permadeath. I don't know if you really call it permadeath in Danganronpa. That feels a little bit of a misnomer, but you get what I mean.
Well, it certainly is permadeath. It's just that it's
right. But I don't know if you think about the fact that there's such a word as permadeath is a very video game thing.
Yep.
To specify that the death is permanent because the natural state is for it not to be. But just to take two games known for death being permanent and make a video game where it is super not.
Yeah. It's
super overtly and constantly engaged with it not being the case.
Yeah, and that's
it. That's interesting to me.
It's really, I think it's very fascinating, and I like the combat systems and how it's all working. Although I will say, so I've gotten one ending so far. The combat gets hard. At least for me, I had to turn the difficulty. The difficulty only has two settings, which is either like sort of your normal or what's called safety difficulty, which is like basically after each round of combat. When I say wave, is like each wave is like you need to defeat all of the enemies out on the field or something like that, at which point it'll move to the next wave where maybe different types of enemies show up or the boss arrives or something like that. When I say round, that's like, you know, each of your party members has done a thing. So those are two different lengths of time. So after basically each round of combat, they're all fully healed and your base health is fully healed. I didn't want to have to go down to that difficulty, you know, to turn it down to that, but also, like, I'm really here for the story, and while I do enjoy the gameplay, it definitely got pretty hard near the end. So it'll be interesting going back to another playthrough to try and get a different ending and to see how things are different, whether I'm any better.
You only have another 99 endings to go?
Mm-hmm. So I'm sure I'll be talking about the game for the next 100 podcasts. It seems like this game has the potential to be incredibly long. Like if you and you don't have to go for every ending, like you can go for as many or as few endings as you want. And I think it's fascinating because Kodaka in particular, well, Kodaka and Uchikoshi both have definitely gotten into the meta sense of we are creating a piece of fiction, but mainly Kodaka with sort of Danganronpa V3. There was definitely a little bit of meta commentary on how this is a piece of fictional content that you are consuming right now, and that this is effectively like a game that for all intents and purposes, this could be, depending on how in-depth every single ending is, which apparently they are very in-depth, this could be sort of a game that just, practically speaking, goes on forever. In the sense of you would have to put in a ridiculous amount of time in order to see all of the content that it has on offer. But I don't know. I don't know for certain how that is, whether that's actually true or not. I will say, so far, wow, I am kind of inclined to believe that it might actually be as content dense, you could say, as it was rumored and purported to be. Because wow. Man, oh man, what a video game! What a piece of interactive entertainment media it is.
Is it art?
Yes, I would definitely say that it is art.
No way.
I mean,
there are people who are gonna be upset with you because video games
can't be art. Well, I
will say
I will fight those people.
I googled 100-line Defense Academy 100% speedrun, and I did not find anything.
Yeah, well, I mean, a speedrun is just skip all of the dialogue. Like, that's...
I'm just saying you could do it. I'm curious.
Like, see, that don't kind of speed... Like, what... I don't... Like, oh, dear. Like, so, okay. I want to say that there was one news thing. Like some reviewer did get quote unquote all 100 endings, but they were skipping the dialogue basically the
that's
entire
cheating.
time, and it took them something like 130 hours. Now, granted, they do have to stop and play all of the combat games, but the fact that skipping the dialogue, and the dialogue in this game skips pretty darn fast, like it's like each text window is on the screen for maybe a couple frames if you're holding down the skip button. It's very, very speedy. And the UI is generally quite responsive as well, I've found. But like, if that's true, that it took 100 and something hours to get all of the endings while you're skipping all of the dialogue, goodness knows how long it would take if you're actually invested and want to see them all and actually like, you know, read them for content and not just blaze through them.
Well, it sounds like we better get cracking then.
Yes, I highly recommend it.
And by we, just like we use James's brain collectively to figure out how much video games should cost, James is going to have to get all 100 endings so he can tell us which ones are the good ones and which ones we should ignore. So that's your homework, James. Good luck with that.
All right, thanks. Great.
I've been playing Sorry We're Closed.
So you start up the game and it says sorry we're closed and then it closes itself?
No, it's what if Silent Hill 2 was more gay, is what I've learned.
Thus even more scary.
I guess.
To the homophobes, that would be true, I suppose, by like literal definition.
Yeah.
Doesn't that make it a game for...
Maybe we shouldn't go into that.
This pun that I'm going with here.
I appreciate
is it a good video game?
It is funny.
It was great.
Is it a good video game, Blue?
It's good so far. I'm liking it, yeah. I'm not very far into it, but it's neat. It's very stylish, and I haven't gotten great at the combat yet, but I'm trying to figure it out. Yeah.
Okay.
Nice.
Now we can end the podcast. We talked a lot about the price of video games, you guys. So now we don't need to talk about it anymore. No one else needs to. Just use James's brain, and you'll know how much to spend on video games. Thank you for listening to this episode of the GameCola Podcast. If you like what you heard, be sure to check us out on our actual internet website, GameCola.net. On our YouTube, GCDotNet, the letter G, the letter C, the word dot, the word net. Watch some Dragon Warrior Quest 2 gameplay. I'm on the episodes now, so you know it's great. I mean, it was good before, but I mean, come on. Podcast Commander Joseph Martin, it's a whole other level.
I haven't been on yet.
Level 16 specifically is the whole other level of the RPG. Go find us on the Discord where we were talking about all this video game price stuff that we used. You could use it. You could shape our brains for the podcast by introducing us to new ideas. Come on, tell us how wrong we are about everything. About prices. Say, actually, everyone should be sad because no one can afford video games anymore.
Sweet
People
engagement.
Maybe sad a little bit.
It is definitely like actually kind of
sarcasm
sad.
May have come off in a way I didn't mean to in that one. You can email us at podcast@GameCola.net, and Jetty can tell us about it when he checks that email. Joseph Martin on Blue Sky. Paul's on Blue Sky, too, if you didn't know that. I don't know, I'm just throwing out. We don't have a Twitter slot anymore, so I feel like I need to say something there. James also has a Blue Sky, but he doesn't use it, which is, like, fair.
Yeah, nope. I just have it. It's a placeholder.
I just use it to try to make Paul laugh. That's the main thing I use Blue Sky for. I hope he enjoys it. This is my main use of social media these days. All right. Well, thank you again for listening to this episode of the GameCola Podcast. Have a wonderful time of day, wherever it is you are listening to this podcast, and we will see you next month. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
Podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Am recording.
I thought you were Blue.
Can be both.
Blu Recording Writer.
Blu Recorder.
Whoa.
That, like the little fiberglass plastic ones that you got at school.
Yeah, that were handed out in elementary school.
Yeah, I can be trill and out of tune.
Not nearly high pitched enough. Not even close.
Twee!
So I think we have the coda.
Yep. It's enough that yep, it's enough that Discord is like when you hit your peak
trying
volume,
to protect us.
Yeah, Joe, when you hit like as you like go into each note, we can hear it, but then the moment you hit peak volume, Discord like cuts it.
That's the energy I strive to bring.
Yeah, well that's how you know that you've got the right. That's how you know that you've got the right idea, because like it's just noise.
Yeah. Okay. Let's sync so I can easily add this to the coda.
All right.
In 3,
I've been recording, so we're good.
2, 1.